All righty. Okay, thank you all for joining us. My name is Dr. Atkins, the Executive Director of Feed the Soul Foundation. A part of Feed the Soul is our free webinars that we have through Grow with Google. And tonight we have our speaker, which is Teaira. Am I saying it right? She is the owner of Dreamcatcher Creative Studio, and today she's going to talk to us about leveraging a rebrand to position you for success. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll pass it off to you.
Okay, thank you so much for having me, Ashley. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping rules. If anybody hops on, please mute your mics and keep them muted, just because I don't want any background noise or feedback. And then also, if you happen to have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. If I happen to miss it, I do have a moment at the end of the conversation where we can actually have questions and I can answer to the best of my abilities, and then take as many notes as you like. And then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so here's a little bit of information about me so that you guys know why I'm here and how I can help you. So I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a business owner, and I actually have about 10 plus years of IT government contracting as my background, which also lends itself to project management. So I have some IT, I've had some project management background, which kind of helps with the entrepreneurship background that I have as well. So before I had Dreamcatcher Creative Studio, I had what I used to call Dreamcatcher Stationery, which focused on helping couples who were engaged pretty much create wedding stationery. So your invitations, your save the dates, anything paper you can think of for your wedding or a special event. So I had that business for about 6 years. I started it back in 2015, and I balanced that with my full-time career in IT for quite some time. And like so many other businesses, like 2020 was crazy for everybody. And I ended up pivoting my business in 2020, and I rebranded to what I now call Dreamcatcher Creative Studio. And so now I serve a different type of market, and now I help other small business owners pretty much transform their brand so that they can have a cohesive brand presence online, in the digital space, and then offline. So I'm referring to anything like your storefront graphics, maybe your business cards and things like that. So it encompasses everything from logo development to strategy to web development and all. So that's now what I do. So I thought it was important to kind of bring this conversation to light, specifically because I rebranded my business and pivoted myself from one industry to another, which is something that is easier to kind of, get that across to other business owners to help them, because I went through the journey as well. So I wanted to kind of let you guys know the pros and the cons and how you can actually make it work for your business. So this is what we'll kind of cover today. We'll go over what a rebrand is. We'll talk about what a brand refresh is and how they compare, because a lot of times they're used interchangeably when they're different. And then we'll talk about the signs that may be what you want to look for to know whether it's time to rebrand, which can also be known as red flags or however you want to frame it. And then we'll talk about some mistakes that I see often and how you can avoid these when rebranding. We'll also go over the strategy and the planning aspect behind the rebrand and how you can bring in your audience by letting them know. So priming them before the rebrand fully takes place, and then executing that rebrand with grace. So this is what we'll cover today. So as I mentioned, of course, we have to talk about what a rebrand is. So a lot of people don't quite know what it is, or when I ask that question, I typically get, the visual component. So like your logo or your colors or something like that being basically rebranded or changed, when really it's how people perceive you. It's how outsiders, external parties perceive your brand, right? So it's beyond just the visual component. It's the visual component, and it's also positioning in which you are in the market. So in my case, I position myself differently, and I also switch markets. So it's more than just the tangible things that you see. So some of the things that I named, like the logo, the colors, the graphics, it's other intangible things, right? So when I speak about intangible things, I'm referring to things like maybe it's your customer service, maybe it's the ambiance, maybe it's the processes behind the scenes. It's just how you do things. So it's beyond just what we think of, which is the visual piece of it. Okay. So what is a brand refresh? So a brand refresh is pretty similar. However, They typically, so when I think of a brand refresh, I typically think of only the visual component, right? So this is normally done when your strategy is solid, you have a solid messaging in place, you just need to have a more visually appealing brand, I would say. Maybe your logo is a little bit outdated, or maybe your colors want to be updated, or maybe you just want to update the header of your website. So it's slight modifications to the visual component. So a refresh is not as extensive as what I call a rebrand. So that's why I wanted to bring the two up, because they're often used interchangeably and they're not quite the same thing. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Also, keep in mind you want to weigh the pros and the cons of each to see whether you want to go a refresh route or you want to go a rebrand route. So in my case, I decided to go the rebrand route, and I'm going to tell you why in a few. But I thought it was more pertinent for my business to completely overhaul everything versus just changing up my colors, just changing up my visuals. And then I'll also kind of dive in as to why I decided to do it that way. All right, so let's talk about signs of a rebrand, okay? So there are tons of signs, but I wanted to kind of cover, I would say the top 5 or 6 that I see most often, and then kind of dive into what these signs mean. And then also I wanted to caveat this by saying not one sign points to a rebrand, all right? It may be cases where multiple things kind of come up as signs or red flags that could point to a rebrand. So the first one I wanted to talk about is how sometimes as a business owner, you outgrow your mission, your vision, your goals, right? So as a business owner, you're constantly evolving, and that's exactly what you should do. The more time you're in business, the more you learn, the more people you meet, your network expands, you get more experience. So you ultimately end up reaching some of the goals that you set, or maybe even your mission changes quite a bit. So that's what I mean when I refer to outgrowing your mission, right? So an example of that would be maybe when you first started your business, you wanted to strive to have a food truck. And so you started with a food truck. But then as business started booming, you realize, okay, maybe people are getting sick of waiting outside. Maybe your clientele is wrapped around the door. Maybe you want to expand and you want to create some type of ambiance, and you want to expand and have an actual storefront. So in this case, you probably have outgrown one of your goals, and now you have bigger goals or bigger aspirations, right? Another example of that is maybe when you started your business, it was a why that was specific to maybe your family needs. Maybe you wanted to show your kids what entrepreneurship looks like. Maybe you wanted financial freedom, whatever it is, right? But maybe over time, you started to have some type of ties with philanthropy, and maybe you wanted to connect it with that. So your brand story may shift, and maybe you want to have some of your proceeds go to some type of cause, right? So that also connects you more to your audience, right? So this is what I mean when I say maybe you've outgrown your mission, your vision, your goals, right? So the next thing is maybe you're not reaching your target audience, therefore you're not reaching your sales goals. So I kind of use these together because typically that's the case. Not all the time, but typically that's the case. So when I say this, I mean, you're not talking to the right people. You're not connecting to the right people, right? So I always tell people to think about what they offer, like what type of product or service that they offer, and then look at it from a broad perspective and say, hey, maybe I'm offering too much. Sometimes the clients don't know what to choose from. So in cases like that, you probably need to niche down, right? So if I was to give an example in regards to like the restaurant industry or something like that, I would definitely use a company like Cheesecake Factory or something. They offer a slew of things on the menu, right? And people go there sometimes because of that, but people may not go there because of that as well, when they may want a specific cuisine or a specific type of food versus being overwhelmed by the amount of items on the menu. However, they've niched down to the fact where their name is Cheesecake Factory and they offer cheesecake, so people go there for that. So when I say that, I always tell people to think about how you can get great at one thing and then perhaps niche down. That way you can focus your messaging around that and then easier meet your target audience and meet your sales goals, right? On top of that, it makes it easier for your messaging to kind of be easier to resonate with people. And then also you can have visuals and the emotional concern that kind of comes together. And the key thing is to have alignment with these three things, which is the messaging, the visuals, and then the emotional response that you want to create. So we're going to kind of dive into that further later down the line. But if those things are not in sync, then it's harder to meet your target audience. It's harder to meet sales goals. So 3, maybe you are expanding beyond what you originally thought, right? So maybe you're local or specific to a region, and now that no longer serves you. So maybe you want to go somewhere else and open a storefront somewhere else. And so you need to be kind of considering these things kind of upfront. I know a lot of times we kind of think maybe 1 year out, maybe 2 years out, but sometimes you have to consider kind of beyond, right? Because you don't want to outgrow your business, right? You want to always be growing into your business. So this is always the case when you're naming your business. You don't want to niche down too far to the point where you don't have room to expand, right? So it's kind of like, you have to look at your business as a whole, right? And kind of decide, where you want to be so that okay, I have room to grow. But that may be a sign that it's time to rebrand. Also take into consideration extensive customer research, because in different locations, customers want different things. So I would definitely say you have to look into that to see what people actually want, right? And so that you can offer something that actually meets their pain points and actually offer a solution, whether it's products, services, food, whatever it is, right? The next one is that maybe your brand is old and outdated. And the reason why I say this is because oftentimes people get this confused with, I want to keep it the same because people know exactly who I am, which can definitely be the case. However, you have to stay relevant with times, right? So if you started your company in the very beginning, what I find is that a lot of times we don't have the funds to invest in what we call like branding, right? So in the beginning, we kind of focus on things that are probably operational or things that go towards the making our products or our services good, but not necessarily marketing in that aspect. So I always tell people to think about, okay, is this old? Is it outdated? Was it something quick that I just put together in order to just come out on the scene? Because oftentimes we don't think about how our logo needs to be memorable. It needs to be timeless. It needs to stand the test of time and not be so trendy, right? It shouldn't be what you see down the street from the same type of shop or location, right? So I always tell people in order to stay relevant, you have to make sure that your branding is kind of up to par, and then also can stand the test of time, because you will evolve, you will get better, you may expand, right? And your goals are going to change. All right. So this is why I say that. So I always tell people to decide, what things they want to invest in, but then also decide, okay, now I have the money for branding or marketing or whatever. So maybe time to actually rebrand so that you can come back better. Okay. The next thing is, of course, you're not differentiating yourself, which is huge. I touched on this a little bit, but basically I know oftentimes when entrepreneurs start, they look to the left, they look to the right, they look on social media, they do their market research, but they get caught up on what everybody else in the industry is doing, that they fail to kind of have that differentiating factor. They try to use that business as a blueprint, when sometimes it is the case because you don't want to reinvent the wheel. However, you want to make sure that it's clear that you are different from your competitors. You have to have some type of value proposition to go off of, right? So price should not be the only factor that sets you apart from your actual competition. And the reason why I say that is because you want your audience, the people that you want to work with, you want them to be able to value the kind of product or service you offer, whether it's food, whatever it is, right? So I always tell people to figure out what your differentiator will be. Consider things like the quality of your product or service. If you're in the restaurant field, think about the culinary experience overall. Think about the atmosphere that you create in your restaurant. Think about the type of customer service that you have, right? These type of things are what people will actually remember when it comes to working with you or you serving them in some kind of way. Don't leave it to just be solely based on price. So the key thing is if you started your business and you haven't quite differentiated yourself from your competitors, it may be time to rebrand. All right. So what does a rebrand look like? So as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, I rebranded my business, Dreamcatcher Stationery, to what I call Dreamcatcher Creative Studio. And so here are the reasons why I rebranded, right? So as I mentioned, I went from a B2C, so business to consumer kind of business, that type of model, to now a model that serves business to business. So what does this mean? So basically, I had a different type of person that I was serving, right? So I went from couples to now other business owners. And then that also meant that I changed the type of service that I offer. And so I no longer offer the things that I did in the past. And I also outgrew my mission and my vision. It shifted when my business model shifted, when I started offering new services. That just innately happens with a lot of businesses. And what I found was that I was kind of stuck into one bubble when my name was Dreamcatcher Stationery, and I didn't leave myself much room for growth, which is why I shifted that part of my name to Creative Studio, so it can be a little bit more broad and it can kind of stand in the family of anything creative, whether I expand, whether I offer a new service in the creative field. So I did this like company name change, and then I was able to expand my portfolio a little bit more. All right, so that's kind of what a rebrand looks like from my perspective, right? So these are some of the reasons. And I also wanted to show you just a quick visual of, the differences between the past logo and then the new logo. I would have showed you more, but I actually didn't even have a screenshot of my old website just to kind of give you a visual depiction of it. But as you can see, there's clear differences between the two, but the main thing that I wanted to kind of touch on was the audience difference, right? So young professionals looking to get married, that was mostly my audience in the beginning. So now I only service other business owners, that's really looking to rebrand their business and position themselves in a different type of manner. They're looking to upgrade or up-level their business, right? So that's just an example. I use myself as an example because I find that people can connect with that a little bit more. So here is some of the mistakes that I see often, and I just want to kind of touch on ways you can avoid these mistakes and do something a little bit different. So as I mentioned, the rebrand is often confused with the refresh, right? So oftentimes I see people on social media, on IG, saying, hey, I'm going through a rebrand, and they just come back with a new logo, or they come back with maybe a new website, right? And their name is the same, and they don't really focus on some of the areas that need real assistance in, right? So they may have areas such as brand strategy that they need to focus on first, which is the back end, which is the foundational type of things that need to be fixed prior to even looking at the actual visual components, right? So this is the type of stuff that you should be thinking about as opposed to solely thinking about the visual component, right? So think about your messaging, think about your processes, think about customer service, think about all these elements that go together and make up your entire brand, right? Because people don't just buy based on looks, they also buy based on word of mouth, experience, etc. So that's mistake number one. Mistake number two is rebranding too early and too often. Okay, so this is huge, because a lot of times business owners, they may start a business, and next thing you know, 4 months down the line, they shift and they have a whole nother logo. They have 3 different color palettes. You look at their feed, you look at their Instagram, you look at their social media site, and nothing looks consistent, right? So they're constantly kind of going through these changes and rebranding. And this is a concern because when you do stuff like this, you don't gain that brand recognition. People don't recognize who you are. And so they should be able to look at you and say, okay, I know exactly who this is, whether it's your logo, maybe your color palette, maybe it's your motto, whatever it is. Your stuff should be parallel enough for clients or prospective customers to know who they're actually talking to, right? So the flip side of this is rebranding. So I talked about too often. So too early, maybe perhaps they don't have enough data that's collected before they decide to rebrand. So when I say data, I mean they don't know their target audience well enough to say, okay, they're looking for this. These are their pain points. These are the issues that I want to tackle. These are the solutions. They haven't gathered enough. So that's why I always urge people to let it sit for a little bit of time in order to know whether something is working or not, whether it's your visuals, your messaging, or whatever. I think you need a little bit of time to kind of see whether it's actually connecting with the right people. Okay. So I'm going to turn on this light because I feel like it's getting a little dark. Okay. All right. So, so that was mistake number 2. So mistake number 3 is huge. So I kind of lumped this all together under the, what do you call it? The research umbrella. So when I say research, I mean, you should be doing your due diligence in every aspect of it. So when I say research, I'm referring to checking with your state to see if anybody has that name, checking to see if it's been trademarked, checking the website to see if the domain is available. Those type of things when you want to rebrand. Before you commit to a new name or whatever, you want to make sure that nobody's going to come after you legally. That is the biggest thing. Because the last thing is you want to invest your time, money, and energy into getting things created around this brand, this new name that you may be created, and somebody has it. Somebody already has stake over that brand, over that name, right? So it's like more time wasted and maybe even more money in some cases when you can just do your diligence up front. So that's what I mean when I say do your research. This also encompasses like internally. So asking your employees what they think about different aspects, maybe even the workplace culture, areas of improvement, doing some external type of research to see, maybe there are blind spots that you don't see. Maybe other people in your field are doing something and you're like, man, this is an untapped market. So when I say research, I mean from a 360 perspective, internally, externally. You can do competitive kind of analysis, right? So look at your competitors, see what type of practices they're doing. Maybe they're doing something good that you can actually incorporate into your business. Maybe they have run into issues or things that you can't avoid, right? Just solely based on the research or watching who's around you. So this is what I mean when I say doing research. So if you don't do research, it's definitely a mistake. You don't want to go into a rebrand without doing it, because you're probably going to waste your time and even your money and your energy, right? So that's the rebrand mistakes. The next thing is to talk about inventory. Take an inventory of your entire brand. Take an inventory of the touch points, right? And when I say inventory, I literally mean look at your brand from a bird's eye view. All right, so look at where you're showing up online, right? Whether it's your website, whether it's social media, whether it's you have a storefront, whether you have business cards. Look at how you're showing up, and then look at how often you're showing up. And you're going to evaluate those 3 things that we talked about before, which is messaging, your visuals, and the emotional response, right? So these things need to be in alignment, right? In order for that brand magic to happen, in order for you to connect with your target audience. So when I say messaging, I'm referring to what type of wording are you using? What type of, how are you describing your business? Who do you serve? What do you do? How do you do that, right? So your messaging should be consistent across the board. It should not be any confusion from your Facebook about to your website. It should be pretty much parallel in a sense so that people know exactly what to expect if they see you in person or online, right? So also think about, your visual components. Do you have some type of style guide or brand presence or guidelines that you're following, right? Do you have a color palette? Do you have a certain amount of fonts that you use on a regular basis? Do you have specific type of graphics that kind of go together with your entire brand? Maybe you have brand photography that was used in the beginning, right? So think about those things, your aesthetic, your overall visuals, right? And those should be consistent. And then also think about the emotional response you're trying to evoke. How do you want people to feel when they interact with your brand, right? So how do you want people to feel when they go to your website? How do you want people to feel when they actually experience your food, for instance? Do you want them to feel a sense of comfort? Do you want them to feel happy? You want this to kind of be universal and for people to know what to expect when actually working with you and interacting with your brand. So this is what I mean when I say audit your inventory, where you show up, how you look, how you sound, how you make people feel, right? So these are all of the touch points, you know, your digital presence on Yelp, your IG feed, your Facebook feed, wherever other type of directory you use. On top of maybe your storefront, maybe your food truck, maybe your email blast, maybe your business cards. Think about all these touch points and if they are actually cohesive or not. If they're not, then it may be time to rebrand. All right. So then you have to determine a plan forward, right? So you need to know where you're going in order to get there. So when I say determine a plan forward, I would definitely say after you kind of do all this research, right, you need to have the information to present it to whoever's on board, right? So your investors, stakeholders, people that's calling the shots, people on the board, they need to get buy-in based on the information that you research, right? They need to be confident enough to say whether this rebrand would be a good look or not, right? So it's important to always kind of have the information up front so that when you present it, they're like, okay, they know what they're doing, they see the value in it, and there's no real pushback, right? So when you're trying to evoke some kind of change, you need people to be on board with you, which is why you want to get the buy-in up front in the beginning stages before you start investing money, time, and goals and all that kind of stuff into it, which is the next step. So determine what you want to get out of this, you know, what your goals are, what the checkpoints are. Put together some kind of timeline that has realistic milestones, right? Based on your goals, what you want to achieve, all right? So when I say that, you want to have maybe different points in which you kind of check your progress to see where you are. You may also want to apply some kind of budget to this so you know, okay, this is what we absolutely have to spend. This is what we can't go over in order to know whether you need to go out and get some kind of funding for the help. So when I refer to funding, maybe you may need business credit, right? In order to get some kind of loan. Maybe you want to go out and get grants. Maybe you want to do both. Right. So being able to know your budget up front may allow you to plan better for the future in order to actually execute the rebrand. And the reason why I say that is because I always urge people to operate in their area of genius, right? So what does this mean? This means stick to your lane. If you know food, if you know whatever, right, your product or your service, try to find areas, if you have the budget, in which you can outsource some of these things, right? So you can build up this team that's going to help you stick to the timeline and maybe stay within this budget in order to get this rebrand done effectively and not just look like a hodgepodge of random things thrown together. So the goal is to assume you have budget in place, assume you have people on board, so then you can actually put together a plan forward and figure out who you're going to outsource to, right? So you may be considering things such as a business strategist, a brand strategist. Maybe you need a trademark attorney. Maybe you know you want to trademark your name to secure yourself. Maybe you need a CPA. Maybe you need a graphic artist who can actually specialize in branding, but maybe you also need a web developer. Maybe they come together as one person, right? So think about how to build up the right team is to determine the way forward. The next thing is to reestablish your brand strategy. And when I say the brand strategy, I'm still referring to the plan, right? So I'm referring to kind of honing in on, okay, what are my new mission? What is my new vision, values, and all of that? Who is my audience? Who am I serving? Excuse me, my baby's in the background. I'm crying a little bit, so excuse me. And then also what my brand story is. What's my why? What kind of problem are you solving? And then think about the thing that we kind of revisited before is what's your value proposition? If you're changing that around, how are you going to position yourself in the market to make yourself marketable to that target audience, right? What are you going to focus on? Are you going to focus on the price and be affordable? Are you going to focus on the ambiance? Are you going to focus on the culinary experience? Are you going to focus on the process? What type of things are you going to kind of sell to your target audience in order to get them to value the type of product or service that you offer? And then refamiliarize yourself with all this information and write the plan out so that it's plain, okay? All right, so now we're going to talk about the brand identity piece, which is the visual component. So as I mentioned, the strategy should come before the visual component because it kind of drives the visual component. The messaging and all that drives the visual component. All right, so you're going to develop, and I always say, if you can hire someone to do this for you, whether it's a graphic artist, a brand strategist, whatever you want to call it, right? Hire someone to help you with the visual components as well. So you may need a new logo suite. All right, you may want to utilize or figure out how you're going to utilize this. Are you going to put it on a t-shirt? Are you going to put it on a hat? Are you going to put it on a billboard? Are you going to put it on a business card, right? So a logo suite would be a part of the brand identity that you may be considering, on top of things such as social media templates. Maybe you need a new website. Maybe you need brand photography, right? So you can showcase how amazing your products are or how amazing you are, right? So you may need brand photography now. Maybe you could only afford maybe stock photography in the beginning, but now you want to make it more personalized, right? And then, of course, you have to establish a color scheme, illustrations, all these kind of things that may go into your brand identity, okay? The next thing is to update your touch points. So all of those areas that we talked about before. So wherever you're showing up online, your website, directories, even physical things, right? You want to make sure all these touch points where you touch your consumers or your customers or your prospective customers are all updated, right? They need to have all the consistent messaging, all the consistent visuals, all of the colors, all of the logos, everything should be pretty much consistent so there's no confusion, right? You want to gain that customer loyalty, that brand recognition, right? And that leads to the loyalty piece. So update your touch points. So I named a couple of these on the slide. So your website, social media platforms, email marketing, if you utilize that. Maybe you have a pitch deck. Maybe you even have a letterheaded envelope. Maybe you have packaging, you give away bags. Those are the type of things that you need to remember to update when it comes to your touch points, because those are another way for their clients to actually remember who you are, like your company, your colors, all that kind of stuff, right? It's just a connection point, which is why I call them touch points. And of course, throughout all of this, I always tell people to look at their audience during all of this kind of stuff, right? And I probably should have said this at the top of the presentation. However, I wanted to focus on how to do it, but I also want to focus on how important it is to bring your audience into this, right? So what I found is that social media is like the key to everything, right? Celebrities are on social media. Everybody's on social media, right? So people want to know, and they want to feel like they know you and what's going on, and they want to feel like they're on the journey with you. So I always say, consider bringing them in on the changes before they fully happen so that they're not taken by surprise when all of a sudden you change your name and you're now known as this, or all of a sudden you change your look or you change the type of product that you offer. So if you let them know little bits and pieces throughout the process, they'll get excited, right? They'll see, oh, something is happening. I'm a part of this process, right? You'll also be able to share the value behind your product or service if you use this as a way to share the content. Tell them why you're making the changes, right? It also helps build trust from you to the client or the consumer, because they feel like, oh my God, they're letting me in on the secret. They're taking me on a ride. They get excited about change, and they really get excited when they feel like they're actually helping with the change. So if you can share bits and pieces of your story, of your changes as they're happening, you can do things like teasers, countdowns to your new website launch, or drop a teaser video or a logo that's animated showing your new logo and say change is coming or something like that. Show them behind the scenes. Maybe you're going from a food truck to a storefront. Show them the build out. Show them the keys. Show them the different things that you would get excited about as a business owner to make them feel like, oh my God, this is really happening. Something new is occurring. People just like that. So I always say, prime your audience, You know, utilize this as a tool to build content, but then also build authority with them. All right, so you become kind of like the expert in the field. You can show your testimonials. You can show people testing things. You can show your proof. You can show the reason why you're doing this, and you can overall share the process with them. And I always say, get creative. Use, if you're on IG and you have a big presence, or maybe not, but you know you're on stories regularly, use the tools that you have that's free at your disposal. Maybe you want to poll them and, you know, ask them this or that. Get them to vote. Utilize your email marketing system if you have that. Do surveys, do all kinds of things in order to get that feedback, right? And make them feel like they're a part of the process. And share the overall transformation. That is absolutely huge. All right, share the transformation. And the biggest thing to take away is this constant content. Constant content that allows you to get in front of them. Share your message, share your value of whatever type of product or service that you have. All right, so they feel like they know you. The more you show up consistently, the better. And then get feedback. So I talked about some of these before, but online surveys are huge. Survey Monkey, things like that. Do focus groups. Maybe you have taste testing. Maybe you do social media polls. But overall, getting this feedback will allow you to look for areas that you didn't even think of and ways you can improve your overall experience. Maybe your product, maybe a way to showcase something or to offer something differently. It just gives you a way to actually give people kind of means to offer improvements to your business and show you ways you can grow, because sometimes we're too close to things so we don't see. So getting feedback externally and even internally from other employees would be great for your business. So get the feedback, and then make adjustments as needed. So I know all feedback is not good feedback, right? So you take the bits and pieces that are necessary and you figure out how you can apply them if you want to apply them. If you want to phase them out, you can also share this part of your story as well. So talk about the changes that you make. Talk about the story. Talk about the evolution. Talk about starting from here and now you're here. People like to see that. People like to see the growth. People like to see you evolve as a business owner, and they like to support a lot of times. So whenever you make these slight modifications or slight adjustments, I always urge people to share that, right? And then amplify your voice about it. Tell people, get on social media, get on Yelp, make announcements. Get on the radio if you can, and talk about your business. Talk about the changes. Talk about the evolution. All right. And I wanted to specifically showcase this brand, which is Slutty Vegan, because I thought they did an amazing job. They have a super strong brand presence, right? And they've only been around for a couple of years. But what I found is that they've had a way to connect great with their audience, right? So you can quickly look at their website, look at their social media presence, right? And see who they're appealing to. They're appealing to the African-American community, and they're trying to make veganism, plant-based businesses, plant-based food, that kind of stuff more appealing to our group, our culture, right? So they use this type of wording, they use the messaging that's so on point with the type of people they're trying to connect with. Even their colors, their fonts, everything is pretty consistent, and you know what to expect when you actually when you look at their presence online and offline, to the point where they have managed to get this type of brand loyalty to the point where celebrities, they want to try out their service, they want to experience it. People wait in lines, all because this brand has such a strong presence, strategy, messaging, and everything behind them. So I thought it was important to kind of showcase a company specifically like in the restaurant field, the culinary field, that I thought has done a good job with branding. Now, I'm not sure exactly how they started, if this was the very beginning. However, if it was amazing just from the start. So think about how strong their brand presence is online. So once again, this is Slutty Vegan. So whenever you have the opportunity to check out their website, check out how they show up online in digital spaces. And then also check out, if you have a chance to go to their food truck or their storefront location, to see how it kind of compares online to offline. Okay. And now we're going to do a recap. So we talked about a lot of different things, but overall, the main goal is to know that rebrands are serious. They compare to refreshes in a sense. However, rebrands are mostly an overhaul of information, visuals, messaging, strategy, positioning, everything. Refreshes are more short term. It's not so much change involved. So think about that when you're trying to figure out which way you want to go for your business or your brand. And then also determine the type of goals you want to have for this rebrand. Don't just rebrand to rebrand. Like, don't rebrand because somebody, your competitor is rebranding, right? Have a real reason for doing this, because it's such a commitment to time, money, and effort that it's not worth just doing it on the fly. So have goals and reasons for wanting to do it. Also do the market research behind all of this, right? See, what people are doing out there. See whether your name is available. See whether these huge changes are even needed, because there's so much that goes into it. The timeline can be long. It can be a couple of months. It can even be longer than that if you have to hire such a huge team to get it done, because some pieces can happen in parallel when other things have to happen in like a sequential type of order. So do the research behind this, right? And then also work with the experts when you can, and stick to your lane when you can, because a lot of times people can do this stuff faster, quicker, and it can help you save money in the overall perspective of things, instead of having to go back and fix them later. And then the last thing that I really discussed was taking people on the journey, getting your audience involved, making them feel like, they're part of the entire process, right? So utilize this as a means to create content, whether it's, doing YouTube videos, whether it's showing up on IG stories, whether it's highlights, however you want to do it. Shoot out email blasts. Do whatever you can to take your audience on the journey, so they're not taken by surprise when you decide to rebrand and maybe offer something different, maybe change your name, maybe change everything, right? So taking them on the journey allows you to have some type of content, and gives them a heads up that something is happening. So that's pretty much everything. So do I have any questions? I didn't see anything in the chat. If I have any questions, feel free to say anything now. If not, I will show my contact information. You can connect with me on Facebook, on Instagram. Here's my email. Here's my website. I'm mostly on Instagram just because I have I guess my audience is on there for the most part. So I know where my audience is. So if you want to connect with me, if you have any questions, if you have, if you need to do a review of your brand to kind of know whether you really are in need of a rebrand, definitely feel free to contact me. I would love to do a consult with you and kind of let you know whether it may be time or maybe not. Just connect with me, and thank you guys so much for listening. And that's really all I have for today.
Thank you so much. And so as she mentioned, if you guys want to reach out to her to ask, to get any questions answered or to find out more information, please reach out to her on Facebook, Instagram, via email, or via her website. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ashley. And from my understanding, everything's being recorded. So if you guys need to go back over this later, you guys will have the link.
Perfect. Thank you so much. You guys have a great evening.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.